The diner's neon sign buzzed faintly in the cool night air as Daniel Cole pushed the glass door open. A little bell above it chimed, announcing his arrival. He paused at the entrance, taking in the scene: red leather booths, old posters of country singers on the wall, the faint hum of a jukebox in the corner playing something soft from another era. The smell of frying butter and sizzling meat wrapped around him, familiar and strangely comforting. Daniel slipped into a corner booth near the window. He liked corners. They allowed him to observe without being observed. He was a man used to attention, though none of the people in this small town would know it. To them, he was just another traveler, a stranger passing through. His jeans were worn, his boots dusty, his baseball cap pulled low. Nothing about him said billionaire. That was exactly how he wanted it. After years of endless boardrooms, polished penthouses, and corporate dinners where smiles were fake and words were calculated, Daniel had begun to crave the opposite: something raw, unpolished, human. He had stepped away from his empire for a while, trading luxury for anonymity. For once, he wanted to see life the way ordinary people lived it, to feel the pulse of the world without money cushioning the experience. A waitress approached his booth, holding a small notepad and pen. He glanced up. She was young, mid-20s perhaps, with auburn hair pulled back into a ponytail and tired shadows beneath her eyes. Yet when she smiled, there was warmth, like sunlight struggling through storm clouds. Her name tag read Emily. "Even in, sir," she said, her voice gentle but edged with fatigue. "What can I get for you tonight?" Daniel gave the menu a quick glance, though he had already made up his mind. Steak, medium rare, mashed potatoes and green beans on the side. "Coffee?" she asked. "Yes, black," she scribbled quickly, nodding. "I'll be right back." As she walked away, Daniel watched her with quiet curiosity. Something about her movements caught his attention, not clumsy, but hurried, as though her body carried a weight heavier than the tray she balanced. He had a keen eye for people. It was what made him a successful businessman. And right now, he could sense something fragile in her, something hidden. The diner wasn't busy. A trucker sat at the counter slurping soup, an elderly couple shared pie in the corner, and two teenagers laughed over milkshakes near the window. It was a simple place, alive in its own small way. But Emily, she seemed out of step, like she was fighting an invisible battle while pretending everything was fine. When she returned with his coffee, Daniel noticed her hands trembled slightly as she set the cup down. She quickly tucked them behind her apron, smiling as if hoping he hadn't seen. "You from around here?" she asked politely, making conversation. "No," Daniel said simply, taking a sip of the bitter black coffee. "Just passing through." She nodded. "Most people are. This town's more of a stop than a destination." There was a sadness in her tone, as if she spoke from personal experience. Before he could respond, another customer waved her over, and she hurried off. Daniel sat back, folding his hands around the warm coffee cup. He thought about her words. A stop, not a destination. He knew the feeling well. For years, his life had been one stop after another: projects, meetings, cities, investments. Yet despite all his achievements, he had never found a true destination, never felt anchored. Wealth had given him everything, except the one thing he silently longed for: meaning. His meal arrived shortly after. Emily placed the steaming plate before him with a quiet, "Enjoy." The steak was cooked perfectly, pink in the center, juices pooling into the creamy mashed potatoes. Daniel cut into it slowly, savoring each bite. For all his access to Michelin-starred restaurants, there was something deeply satisfying about simple diner food made with care. As he ate, he noticed Emily again. She moved briskly between tables, smiling, refilling cups, checking on guests. But her hand kept brushing against her apron pocket, as though something hidden there weighed on her mind. Once, she caught him watching and quickly looked away, her face flushing with embarrassment. When she returned to refill his coffee, something unexpected happened. As she leaned forward to set down the pot, her hand slid a folded piece of paper under his plate. Her face remained calm, professional, but her hand lingered for a fraction of a second too long, as if silently begging him to read it. Daniel froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. He glanced up at her, but Emily had already turned away, moving briskly toward another table. She didn't look back. His heart thudded with curiosity. Slowly, he slid the paper free and unfolded it beneath the table, careful not to draw attention. The handwriting was rushed, uneven, trembling. Please, if you can help, I don't know who else to turn to. My daughter is very sick. The hospital says they won't treat her unless I pay up front. I don't have it. I'm begging you. Emily. Daniel read the words again. And again. His hand went slack, the fork clattering softly against the plate. For years, people had come to him asking for things, investments, partnerships, favors. All of them calculated, transactional. But this was raw desperation. Not for herself, but for her child. He glanced across the diner. Emily was laughing politely at something one of the teenagers had said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Beneath that practiced cheer, he now saw the exhaustion in her slumped shoulders, the pain in her eyes, the weight she carried alone. Daniel sat there, stunned. She had no idea who he was. To her, he was just another stranger eating steak at a booth. She had risked humiliation, maybe even her job, by slipping that note to him. It wasn't greed, it was courage. A mother's courage. And it stopped him cold. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something stir deep inside him, something stronger than profit margins or boardroom victories. He had come here searching for truth, for something real. And perhaps, in this small town diner, in the trembling handwriting of a desperate waitress, he had just found it. Daniel sat frozen for several minutes, the note heavy in his hands, heavier than any contract he'd ever signed. His steak sat half-eaten, forgotten. The words replayed in his mind. Please, my daughter is very sick. He had lived among billionaires and world leaders, surrounded by people who never asked for help unless it benefited them. Yet here was a young woman, a waitress in a worn diner uniform, who had reached out not for herself, but for her child. He looked at her again. Emily was back at the counter, pouring coffee for the trucker. Her smile flickered, but her eyes looked far away, like someone standing on the edge of a cliff. Daniel felt a tug inside his chest. He could walk away, pretend he hadn't seen the note. But something about her courage, her quiet desperation, rooted him to the booth. When Emily returned with his check, Daniel looked up at her. His voice was steady, but his eyes searched hers deeply. Emily, he said softly, sit with me a moment. Her hand tightened around the checkbook. She glanced nervously toward the counter where her manager stood polishing glasses. I can't. My shift. I'll cover it, Daniel interrupted gently. He reached into his wallet, pulling out a crisp $100 bill, sliding it across the table. Just for a few minutes. Please. Hesitation flickered in her eyes, but something in his tone, firm yet kind, made her pause. Slowly, she slipped into the seat across from him. Her apron crinkled in her lap, and her hands fidgeted nervously. You didn't have to write this, Daniel said, holding up the note. Her face drained of color. I'm sorry, she whispered quickly. I shouldn't have. She broke off, her voice shaking. I'm desperate. I didn't know what else to do. Please, just forget it. I can't, Daniel said firmly. Not after reading this. Tell me about your daughter. Her lips trembled. For a moment, she looked as though she might bolt. But then the dam broke. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, her name is Lily. She's 7. She has a heart condition. The doctors say she needs surgery soon or she won't. Her voice cracked, and she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth before continuing. The hospital said they won't even schedule it unless I pay up front. I've sold everything I could, my car, even my wedding ring. But it's still not enough. Her hands covered her face, shoulders shaking. I'm sorry. You probably think I'm pathetic. Daniel's throat tightened. For a moment, he was silent, watching this young mother break before him. All the wealth he had accumulated, all the skyscrapers with his name etched into them, none of it felt as real, as raw, as this moment. Emily, he said softly, you're not pathetic. You're brave. You asked for help when most people would have suffered in silence. That takes more strength than you know. She shook her head, tears streaking down her cheeks. But I don't even know you. I slipped a note to a stranger. That's how desperate I've become. Daniel leaned forward, his voice calm but filled with a quiet authority. I'm not just a stranger. My name is Daniel Cole. Her tearful eyes flickered with recognition. She froze. Daniel Cole, as in the tech company. He nodded. That's me. Emily's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. She stared at him as though seeing him for the first time. He didn't look like the billionaire splashed across magazine covers, but the calm certainty in his gaze told her he was telling the truth. And right now, Daniel continued gently, none of that matters except this, your daughter will have her surgery. I'll take care of everything. Completely. Emily gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. Tears flooded her eyes. No, I can't let you. You can, Daniel said firmly. And you will. Sometimes life puts people in our path for a reason. Tonight, that's you and Lily. Her shoulders trembled as sobs broke free. She buried her face in her hands, crying silently in the middle of the diner. Daniel reached across the table, covering her trembling hand with his own. For the first time that night, she didn't pull away. Within hours, Daniel had made the calls. He didn't care that it was late, the best doctors answered when he called. By the time he left the diner, arrangements had been made. Emily didn't believe it until the hospital called her the very next morning, confirming Lily's immediate admission and fully covered expenses. When she heard the words, Emily collapsed onto her kitchen floor, clutching the phone, weeping with relief. Days later, Lily was in a pristine hospital room, her small body hooked up to monitors. Emily sat by her bedside, holding her hand tightly. She had expected Daniel to vanish, like some passing angel, but he didn't. He showed up, quietly, without fanfare. He stood at the doorway the day of Lily's surgery, dressed simply as always, his presence calm and steady. Emily's eyes were red from sleepless nights. Why are you here? She whispered. Daniel smiled faintly. Because this isn't just about money. You shouldn't go through this alone. The hours crawled by as the surgery took place. Emily paced the waiting room, whispering prayers through trembling lips. Daniel stayed by her side, silent but steady, a pillar in her storm. When the surgeon finally emerged with a tired smile, Emily nearly collapsed with relief. The surgery was a success, the doctor said. Your daughter's going to be okay. Emily sobbed, collapsing into the nearest chair. She covered her face, whispering Lily's name over and over. When she looked up, Daniel was still there, his eyes shining with quiet emotion. Weeks later, Lily was home, her cheeks rosy with health, her laughter echoing through the small apartment. Emily watched her play with dolls on the carpet, tears of gratitude welling in her eyes. She looked up to find Daniel standing quietly by the door, watching the little girl with a softness she hadn't seen before. You saved her, Emily whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, you did. You had the courage to ask for help. All I did was listen. Emily's voice broke as she stepped forward, hugging him tightly. For a long moment, neither spoke. But in that embrace, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years, purpose. He had come here searching for truth, for something real. And he had found it. Not in boardrooms or skyscrapers, but in the handwritten note of a desperate mother, and the heartbeat of a little girl who deserved a future. For the first time, Daniel realized that maybe his fortune was never meant to be hoarded, but shared. And in giving, he had found the one thing money could never buy: meaning.